I'm Mia Baines and this is my Formula 1 US Grand Prix review for 2022. So what a great Grand Prix we had this weekend in the Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. We had a slightly mixed up grid to start with both Leclerc and Perez taking grid penalties. We did then also have Mercedes locking out the second row, which is something that was definitely handy, as they were the only team that had two cars up at the front and in the running, which meant they could afford to split strategies if they wanted to. There was a little bit of uncertainty though with Mercedes, as Lewis Hamilton's car was subject to some very last minute brake repair, and he actually had to have whole new brake discs and everything on his car on the grid in the last few minutes before the start of the race. But they pulled through and they managed to get everything sorted in time for the start of the Grand Prix. So it was lights out and away we go. We had a big collision at the start on the opening lap as we went up into the first corner, with George Russell slightly locking up and then crashing into the side of Carlos Sainz, which unfortunately meant we lost Sainz from the race, as he did suffer from a water leak, which meant he was not able to continue the race. George Russell did get a 5-second time penalty for this, which he did serve in his first pit stop. We then started in for the race, and just when it was starting to get a little bit calm and the cars are all spreading out a little bit, we then have Bottas, who spun off and beached his car on the side, which brought out the safety car. And that safety car restart was definitely one of the most eventful we have seen. Maybe not topping Abu Dhabi last year, but one of the most eventful safety cars, because we had Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso being extremely close, and Fernando Alonso tried to overtake Lance Stroll, and unfortunately Lance Stroll just did a little last minute move to defend to the side, and Alonso just clipped him. It was quite a big crash. It was very high speed, and Alonso was actually flipped up and doing a wheelie for about the next 10 metres, but thankfully he managed to sort of steer his car around and carry on. Lance Stroll was not so lucky. He had a massive spin, and this brought out another safety car because there was just so much debris all over the track. I was quite surprised personally it wasn't a red flag, but the race directors seemed to be able to sort it under the safety car, so it was all fine. Unfortunately, this did mean that we lost Lance Stroll from the race. Fernando Alonso did manage to crawl his way around to the pits, and after a new front wing and a new set of tyres, he was good to go. He actually managed to crawl back through to P7, which was pretty impressive. He did actually end up dropping to P17 after the race due to a protest from Haas F1 in regards to his car being in an unsafe condition, and the FIA did rule after checks that his car was actually unsafe due to the damage it had got from that crash. So unfortunately Alonso did actually drop down to P15 after the race. Lance Stroll was fine, both the drivers were fine after the crash, but Lance Stroll did get a 3-place grid drop for the next race in Mexico, and he did get 2 penalty points added to his licence. But the drama was not quite over yet. We then had Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton having a very close battle. Max Verstappen had an unfortunate 11-second pit stop due to an issue with one of the wheel guns on his front left tyre. This meant that Charles Leclerc actually managed to overtake him in the pits, which you don't see very often. This meant that Max came out of the second lot of pit stops in net P3 behind Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Sebastian Vettel was actually leading the race at this point, which was insane to see. So Max was net 3, as Vettel hadn't pitted at this point. Max did manage to have a nice tasty little battle with Charles, and he did end up overtaking him to take P2. And then he did eventually catch up to Lewis Hamilton with about 5 laps to go. It was very close to the end, but the speed of that Red Bull is just so fast at the minute. The Mercedes just did not have an answer for his pace, and unfortunately Max Verstappen did manage to overtake Lewis Hamilton with about 5 laps to go. This meant that Max took his 13th win of the season, equaling the record of Schumacher and Sebastian Vettel for the most number of race wins in a season. That is a historic record for the young Dutch driver. He's got so much more to go, and he's already matching records of Michael Schumacher. That is impressive. It also meant that Max sealed the Constructors' Championship for Red Bull, which ends Mercedes' 8 years of dominance in that championship, which was so touching for them on a weekend where their co-founder unfortunately passed away. A few honourable key moments from that race. Sebastian Vettel, as I mentioned, he led a couple of the laps, which actually meant that he actually increased his record for the number of laps he's led from 3,499 to a nice round 3,500, which has got to be something that he is very happy to do, and especially to be finding at the front in the Aston Martin on his last year in F1. It was great to see Seb in first place again. Lewis Hamilton must have walked away from the weekend with quite a few mixed emotions. He did look quite downhearted at the end, but he was so praising of his team and the strategy and how well they had performed. It was just so unfortunate that that car is just not quite quick enough this season. But with only 3 more races to go this year, who knows what could happen next year. We also have to mention poor Daniel Ricciardo, who suffered from an awful day this weekend. He loves the Texas Grand Prix. He even rode in on a horse on Thursday, which I don't think anyone has ever done before. But poor Daniel Ricciardo could just not get that McLaren to turn on today, and he unfortunately did not have the best day and ended up trundling around at the back of the pack for the majority, which is not what we want to see at what could be potentially his last Texas Grand Prix. He does not yet have a drive for next year, and with the only seat left being Haas, it is looking more and more unlikely by the day. I hope you enjoyed my USA Grand Prix review. Don't go anywhere though, because next week we have got the Mexican Grand Prix, and with home driver Sergio Perez looking as strong as ever, could it be Perez is up for a win in his home race? We'll have to wait and see.